This is Paul Glumaz again, and today is the 22nd of August. Okay, and this segment is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. So in this segment, I want to go through with you the very complicated situation we are in with respect to what otherwise has been an inevitable process, which is the inevitable process towards the ultimate collapse of the City of London-based global financial system. It's not something that can be stopped, but it is something that can be postponed again, postponed again. But ultimately, it must come down. And every time you postpone it through some kind of either helicopter money or lowering interest rates or quantitative easing, you create a situation where the volume of money or credit, if you want to call it, is accelerating to sustain financial instruments or financial aggregates which are growing. But in this situation, the monetary aggregates are growing at a faster rate than the financial aggregates to sustain the financial aggregates, which would otherwise blow out. So you're sitting on a minimum of 1.5 quadrillion. That's 1,500 trillion financial aggregate time bomb, and that's probably a conservative estimate. Okay, and that's the derivatives, and that whole system is now going into a phase of crisis, and the financial crowd in the City of London, who had their event going on right now in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, are now discussing how do you deal with this situation. So the idea is this: if you can subordinate further the sovereign powers of the nation to the private international financial sector, you can then have a even more greater helicopter money capability. Okay, so that's the first thing. So BlackRock investment, which is one of the largest investments, is got a plan to basically make the governments and the central banks both totally subordinate to the financial system. Now that's partially already the case through something called the Financial Stability Board, the FSB, which was set up in 2009, which has the power to some degree dictate to nations and their central banks how they're going to deal with a globally significant financial institution which is threatened by a collapse. And this is where the bail-in comes in, where the globally financially significant institution will be allowed to convert its depository and bond obligations into banks' shares, which is the equivalent of a confiscation. So they want more control to avoid a collapse, and that's the way it's politically being played. We want more control to avoid a collapse. And this includes moving heavily into what are called, getting the central banks to move heavily into negative interest rates. Bonds will have negative yields. Okay, so you invest your money in a bond and you have a negative yield. That means you are not getting paid, but rather your yield is less. You're losing money. Okay. And that's a lot of the bonds that are out there, institutional bonds, a large part of the government bonds internationally, and have now gone into a negative, negative interest rates, negative yields. So in other words, if you borrow money, it's at a very low interest rate or higher, but if you invest, you get negative interest rates. That is insane. That is a direct assault on the savings of the population, because what it means is that your savings are going to be depleted by a combination of inflation and negative interest rates. That is a form of looting. That's a form of taxing the population. So that's another example of what they're trying to do. Now, this gets very complicated. Already, all of the indicators are showing that there is a slowdown in the physical economic activity. The slowdown in transportation, a slowdown in manufacturing. The only part of the world where there's not a slowdown going on are those areas of the world which have involvement in the physical development centered around the Belt and Road. So all those nations that are connected to the Belt and Road, who are involved in the Belt and Road, are not experiencing the slowdown. They might be experiencing some slowdown, but overall they're growing, they're developing. Whereas in those nations which have rejected participation in the Belt and Road, in Europe and North America, there is a slowdown, and this is just getting started. And there is a certain panic going on in the financial centers. We're not just talking about the theft to depositors, the theft to countries that are holding the bonds and so forth. We're talking also about the question of, can this system be further sustained? How long can the system be further sustained? When does it all go? Now, a lot of the experts are saying it could be this fall and winter. And other experts say it will be next year before the elections. Okay. So it's a question how long all of this can be sustained is not known. But Donald Trump has boxed himself in with these people that he has around him as Treasury Secretary, as Commerce Secretary, as economic advisors, as trade. These guys are totally off. They're part of the apparatus. They are totally with whatever's coming with this system. They themselves will do everything they can to prop up the system. And Trump has been saying, we have this great economic, boom because I'm president and Wall Street is doing great, the stocks are going up and all of that. And he has caught himself in a box with these enemies of his. Whether they say they're enemies of his or they're not serving him. They're part of the machine. But that's what he has gone with as his, negotiators with the trade deal and all of that. So he is coming into a situation where the economic reality is going to turn south on him. And this will be the opportunity for when the Democratic Party and the media and everybody's going to say it's Trump which is causing the economic crisis. Now, if Hillary were president now, it would be China which is causing the economic crisis. because they would believe that Hillary would be there to serve them, and therefore she would not cause the crisis. It would be China that's causing the crisis, and we have to go to war with China because they're causing the crisis. But since Trump is the more immediate problem, they're going to say it's Trump which is causing the crisis. This is very important. Now, Donald Trump, cannot survive at all in this period unless he counterattacks and puts the blame on to the City of London, to the international financial system. He's going to have to pull out the big gun. The big gun is Lyndon LaRouche's New Bretton Woods. The big gun is Glass-Steagall. He cannot survive at this point unless he's willing to take on the real enemy of the human race. Now here's where it gets very kinky. Okay, this gets very kinky. Two things are going on simultaneously. The Financial Stability Board created this group, this task force on climate risk, which created the Green Financial Initiative. What they're getting ready to do is take all this new credit they're going to create and channel it into green projects. In other words, $10 trillion type is going to go into green projects, because we all know, right? We all know that global warming is the greatest threat to the human race. That those increase of carbon dioxide from the carbon emissions from oil and from gas and from coal, and from cows, because cows put out a lot, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to cut back consumption of meat, and we need most of all to cut back consumption of those hydrocarbons. We need to go to a renewable resource system, which means solar, windmills, and so forth. So you're going to have millions of people being put out there to work in those areas, and and that's going to be the way they plan to deal with the economic consequences of the breakdown that the economy is going into, the slowdown, the breakdown. You want a job? We got a job for you. You have to go to wherever the solar panels are, or wherever the windmills are, or whatever. You're going to be very much employed in green projects, whatever those are. But the idea behind that is, why do they want to push that? Because their view is to bring the world through a kind of crisis where on the other end the population of the earth is lowered to about 1 billion people. So there's another component to this which is connected to this, which is the seen in the attack that Putin did on the U.S. testing these special new Tomahawk missiles. And what Lavrov said, and what Shoigu, the defense minister of Russia, is saying, is that the ABM system set up in Poland and being set up in Poland and currently in Romania gives an offensive capability, a first strike capability, a war-winning first strike capability. And so the abrogation of the INF Treaty was the preparation by the City of London and their forces inside the U.S. military and NATO to prepare for a preemptive first strike against Russia and China and after a nuclear war, those individuals who survive will be vectored into a Green New Deal, essentially. Because you're not going to be able to implement the Green New Deal just in terms of the support of the population, because it's not going to create any wealth. It's going to deplete the wealth. But more importantly, most people are not concerned about carbon dioxide emissions. It's only a minority who are concerned. So you're not going to become more popular by implementing this Green New Deal. In fact, nobody believes you can implement. It's going to be popular. But in a post-nuclear war period, where all the infrastructure has been wiped out, all the advanced civilizational centers have been destroyed, it is precisely the appropriate technology for a post-nuclear world, nuclear war world. So that's what the Green New Deal is. It's the appropriate technology, using draft animals rather than tractors. Okay, it's about going back to 1 billion people. So you have the nuclear war, and the survivors go back to, a quasi pre-industrial situation. So that's essentially where. So the financial crisis is embedded. The financial crisis is inevitable. It will have to happen in some form. The current response to this is to further tighten the bankers' dictatorial control over nations, bankers' dictatorship. That's what's being discussed right now at the Jackson Hole meeting, and also what will be discussed at the G7 meeting in Biarritz, France, which is starting today, the 22nd of August. The Jackson Hole event is probably ending today. So you have nuclear war as the primary vector for deindustrialization. And then you have the Green Initiative as the primary vector for the kind of world we need to be living in the post-nuclear war era. This is what I'm getting the sense of. Okay. Donald Trump, who is neither in favor of preemptive nuclear war, nor in favor of the green agenda, nor in favor of these financial interests, is however boxed in. And he is being put in a place where he's going to have to go with a different policy. And only if he can work with Russia and China can he go to that different policy. He's got to take on the financial power directly and wipe it out and create a new system. And that's where we are. And it's a very, very scary, very profound. Most people don't want to even think about what I'm talking about. That this is where these people want to take us. They don't want to think about it, but that's where they want to take us. So if you are saying, well, if you're being pessimistic and you're saying, well, I don't think there's anything we can do, it's going to go that way, I might as well go to Alaska or try to go up into the mountains and try to, figure out a way to survive. Well, there are many people who are thinking that way, and there are many people who are preparing for that, But I think that's very selfish. I think it's a horrible world that you're going to be living in. I personally would rather not have to live in that world. I would rather die trying to make sure that we don't enter that kind of world. Well, where do I put my money? And all of the, the prep, everything that you see out there in terms of the preppers and everything else like that, also is vectored into this situation, because that's the world that they're projecting. And they're not the cause of it. They're not a problem in and of themselves. It's just that their pessimism and the lack of seeing any viable alternative policy, like the LaRouche policy, is what's vectoring into that system. Because if you are a person that is aware and can see through the lies, this is the tendency for you to see it in this way. So that's where we are now. So now the Hong Kong situation plays into that. This is not something that happened yesterday. This is something that's been prepared for a long period of time. The key person in Hong Kong who is the billionaire behind a lot of this, his name is Jimmy Lai. And he, he goes back all the way to Tiananmen Square, involved in Tiananmen Square, and actually creating Tiananmen Square. And he was meeting with Mike Pence and so forth. So the U.S. forces that were directly involved in the Ukrainian coup are the National Endowment for Democracy, both houses of Congress, the CIA, British intelligence. This whole apparatus is completely involved in this Hong Kong situation. And the Chinese have made it very clear recently, in the last couple days, we don't care. We're a sovereign nation. We're gonna do what we have to do. Hong Kong is part of China. Okay, and you get out. And so you have this British element in Hong Kong, which is not the foreigners that live there. It's a cultivated nostalgia among a young bunch of people that don't know any difference of the glorious days under the British colony. Which there's also a secondary aspect which is very important. China, in the long run, was intending to get at the criminal crowd that operates in Hong Kong, where there's a criminal element that's involved in international crime, a crime in China, and then money comes out and then it gets laundered in Macau and the casinos of Edelman. So you have this, who was the major backer of Newt Gingrich, Edelman. And so you have these people involved in the Hong Kong situation. Then the Hong Kong situation is being played back into the constituency around Trump, which is labeling, the Democrats as communist, socialists. They're doing the whole communist, socialist thing. And then they're saying, well, China's communist and socialist is the same thing. This is China's imperialism. And without any proof, they're linking the whole Democrats' policies into China, which is totally, and there are many people out there who are playing upon the ignorance of people on all of this. And so there's all these attacks from the conservatives on the liberals, on liberalism. But liberalism itself is not the problem. The problem of liberalism is its inability to properly understand and deal with evil. That's the essential problem of liberalism. Liberals are easily fooled, and they want to do good, mostly, the decent ones. But they are unable to properly locate the evil intentions in a lot of the things that they end up subscribing to. And when they are confronted with the evil intentions of those things that they subscribe to, whether it's the Green New Deal, or whether it's removing Trump, or whether it's massive support for lowering the voting age to 16, or whatever the particular issue, even gun rights, they can't see that outlawing guns will not stop any of this stuff. They cannot connect. It's a nominal thing where they say, well, we need to end poverty. How do we end poverty? Well, we need to put money into the homeless. They don't see the big picture of the entire global banking and financial system. Okay, so liberals have a problem understanding reality. Liberals have a problem understanding the consequences of what it is they're promoting. And when they're confronted with that, they go into a kind of special kind of psychological paralysis. And I don't know if you've ever confronted liberals on stuff where you actually are able to confront them on the consequences of they change the subject, they don't know what to do. They're unable psychologically to cope with reality. And so they try to say, well, I'm trying to do the best thing I can for my friends or for the people around me. The world's a terrible place. So this liberalism is a profound, intellectually impotent problem. Okay, and so, but the real problem is that the people that are running all these things are not liberal. They are genocidal. They have an intention, and they're using liberals. And this reminds me of the comments that Hitler said. That liberals won't be a problem for implementing what he wants because they won't understand and they won't stand up to him. And also Trotsky said liberals are useful idiots.
Common stock investments have helped to make our country prosperous and powerful. Owning a share in American industry is like owning a share in the future of our nation. But remember, John Q, there is a risk as well as an advantage in owning any kind of property. So get the facts before you put your money to work.